Hi, Glenn here, the People's Carpenter. I have finished this dining table for my grandson and it turned out rather beautifully. In this video, because the last video was all about the legs and the aprons and the stretchers, so getting the frame together with all the mortise and tenon joinery, none of that in this video. It's all about the top, about making it all nice and level, making it into a nice flat piece, and importantly, attaching it to the frame, because as you may know, you can't just screw it on. You have to allow for natural wood movement. So I discussed that and how to get around the problem that nature gives us. Yeah, I think it went well. It turned out exactly as I had hoped. So I hope you enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed, then give this video a watch, and if you think it's decent, please consider subscribing. Enjoy. Hey, happy Sunday afternoon. Let's get to work on this top. Recall that I bought this top, I bought this piece from the guy who built the extension on this garage. He wanted to clear out a bunch of space. It was all being stored inside a shipping container and they had to get rid of the shipping container. So it's kind of like it's been stored in a small metal shed. And I don't know how long ago it was made, which raises the issue of what I need to check. Because it might have been nice and flat when it was made, but being stored under those conditions for some time, when it's not finished, it has no sort of protection against moisture, who knows how it may have warped. Now, how straight does your tabletop, how flat does your tabletop need to be? It doesn't have to be flawless. It's not an engineering surface. I wanted a longer ruler than that. Oh, here we go. So, you know, if it's roughly as straight as flat as my ruler is straight, that's good enough for me. Of course, you have to check it in a number of directions. So that's fairly good. The middle is ever so slightly lower than the ends, but it's so close to being straight that wouldn't bother me. You can barely see any light there. Okay, that's not so good. You can see a fair bit of light there. So the corners, those two corners at least, are a bit on the high side. Yeah, same situation there. I mean, would you really notice sitting there? Probably not, but I don't like it. So let's check the other side. In theory, the corners will be low. Okay, and sure enough, I'll show you this too. Even with the ruler going straight down the middle of the piece, there is light showing. Not so much, well, a little bit at that end, but certainly at that end. So there is a hump in the middle, which is what you would expect if the corners are low, and yeah, definitely there is light showing at those corners, and I would expect that to be the case here as well. Yeah, big time. Okay, so I can see what's going on here. I'm going to have to basically lower that section, the whole middle section on that side. That's what I'm going to have to do. And on this side, well, I'm just making these marks because by the time I'm finished processing this piece of wood, these marks should be gone. Now, I'd like to demonstrate more than one method of doing this, so I will. And there are only two sides, so I can demonstrate two methods of doing this. One method of flattening a piece of wood is by using my flattening jig. But I've used that not long ago. I used it to flatten a walnut slab coffee table. And I like to cover lots of different ground on this channel, so while I'm sure I will do that again, I won't do it this time. I'm going to use both a traditional and a more modern, more contemporary method of flattening. I will use planes on one side and a drum sander on the other. My bench top isn't perfectly flat, but it's not bad. My hunch is that, given that all the corners on the other side are a bit high, this probably won't rock. No, it's not rocking. It's just that it's got a raised middle. So the middle section won't be touching my bench on the underside, but the corners will. So that's handy. I will put it through my drum sander with this side up to flatten the hump in the middle. And then once that's more or less flat, I'll flip it over and then I'll use hand planes to lower these corners that are high. So my drum sander over there it's not awful, but it's a low-end drum sander. Good drum sanders, like really good machines in general, are quite expensive. And I guess this is the downside of relying on machinery to do it. In order to do it well with machinery, you're going to have to spend quite a bit. Yeah, as I didn't. It will generally do a good basic level sanding, but wow, you know, when it comes to quality and how long it takes, you're going to run into issues. So things are better now on this. Of course, you can't just sand the middle. I had to keep sanding until I was just about sanding the whole top. And to get it perfect, I would have sanded a bit more, because as you will see, there is still some space there, but not very much. Not very much at all. And so that will do. It has, it's a fairly coarse grit on there, 80 grit, and well, it's a pain to change because you have to wrap this long strip of sandpaper around the drum, so I don't change it very often. And there is some burn there, so I'll do a bit of sanding with my random orbital sander to get rid of that. This is going to be my underside, which is why I use the drum sander on it, because I know that it doesn't necessarily produce a great finish. You can get great finishes with drum sanders. You just have to spend a bit of time changing paper, and ideally spend a bit more money and get a better machine. But that'll do. That's okay. The other side, I'm going to do the old-fashioned way. So this is going to be the top side of the tabletop, and well, so you can see there's a gap. You can see there is a gap. So initially what I'll do is I'll do these one at a time with my smoothing plane, and as I go, I'll just keep checking that gap until the gap is, well, at least negligible. There's not that much gap there. So it's a partial cup. Actually, maybe it's not just the corners. Maybe it's all the way along. That appears to be the case. So that's a case of cupping. Yeah. So I'll do some smoothing down that side, then some smoothing down that side, checking as I go. Five and a half, just because it'll be quicker. Yeah, this is definitely my favorite plane. It's got a really good piece of iron in it. I've got it nice and sharp, and it's obviously set up quite nicely. That's a full width, very, very thin piece. Planing is also really good exercise. If you're not fit and a board requires lots of planing, you'll find out quickly. See, I'm going to keep getting distracted by things like that. Slow improvement, and that's okay. Okay, we're getting there, and I can see that it's just the very edge over here now that's holding the end of the ruler up. Okay, that's progress. Now, some may say, why are you not using winding sticks? That's a good question. I don't have any. I'll do a video about those in the future. You can get by without them, as good as they are. I'm panting a bit after all that planing. Now, on that piece of wood there, I figured out quite quickly through practice that planing in that direction was going with the grain. So there's no tear out here. I figured out pretty quickly that that way is with the grain on this piece, but still, I mean, wood has a mind of its own, and grain isn't always uniform. Sometimes it'll appear to go one way, and then for a patch it'll wave in the other direction, because there, and most of that is silky smooth, which says yes, you were going the right way, but there are just a couple of patches where there is a small amount of tear out. And if I turn the plane around and come this way, then I start tearing out everywhere. So I was going in the right direction, I'm quite sure, but, well, like I said, wood has a mind of its own, so I will sand this tabletop. So I meant to press record when I put this across the jointer, but I forgot to. So what I've done now, I've now put it across the jointer and got a nice flat, straight edge with right angles, and using that as my starting point, I'll now go ahead and shape this into the final rectangular shape and dimensions that I want. Okay, so I have a straight edge that I trust. Now I'm going to create a straight end that I trust. Right, now I've got two edges that I trust. Now, 46 by 66 centimeters is what I want this to be. I'll trim this, and then I'll measure the length from this end and cut this end off again. I can just see there is a split near the end that I'd like to remove. Yeah, that seems wise. $66. There's something I did not anticipate, and that is that whoever created this laminated top did so using domino joiners. So now I've got an exposed half a domino. You can see the cross section of a domino. See, I could get away with maybe 1 centimeter, well, maybe not, but I could get away with half a centimeter removed, 5 millimeters, and it just looks to me like that's the very edge of the domino. So I'll do that. I'll take off another just 5 mils. Ha ha ha! Victory! I have removed all of that domino. Good. Good. Well, I'm glad about that. Yeah, so now we're about 65.5 centimetres, which is okay. You know, no one's going to look at it and go, shouldn't this be half a centimetre longer? Alright, now the final piece to cut is the strip off there. I'd like to leave it on. You know, I think bigger tabletops would be nicer, but this is what the customer, my daughter, would prefer. She doesn't want it too much bigger. I'm only removing... Oh, that is ridiculous. I would be removing only just under half a centimetre, so I'm not gonna trim that. I'm not gonna trim that. That will just do. Yeah, that'll be fine. Righto, now I'll give this a sand to remove any rough spots from that tear out that I mentioned earlier. I'll flip it over and give it a bit of a sand on the underside to remove the burn, but it doesn't have to look nice on the underside, it just has to look tolerable because you can't see the underside. Just see a patch that I'm not quite happy with yet. Good, and that's a nice smooth 4-flute router bit as well. I may touch it up with some 400 grit paper, but that is not at all rough. It's a nice cut. Okay, I'm going to stop for the evening. Tomorrow I'm going to move on to attaching this to the top and finishing. Now, I know that I don't need earmuffs to apply oil, but they double as Bluetooth headphones. I will apply another coat, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. Got a towel down because I don't want the nicely sanded top side of my table to get damaged. Okay. And that's, yeah, so I did make that half a centimetre shorter, but, you know, you would never know. That's fine. Okay, that positioning looks fine. Let's talk about how I'm going to fasten the top onto the frame. So because this is a solid piece of natural wood, it is going to move over the course of its life. Well, you know, not life, but existence. And so when it absorbs moisture, it expands, and when it dries out it contracts. And the way that wood expands and contracts, you can see the lines, the grain lines running along the wood. Think of those lines as like straws all packed together, and when wood expands, those straws all get a bit further apart. So wood contracts and expands like a big, not xylophone, piano accordion, like a squeeze box. It really doesn't expand that way. It will expand that way for the same reason, because that way and that way is more or less equivalent, but because it is stretched out this way, this is the way wood is going to contract and expand. And so if you just screwed everything in place so that it couldn't move, well, it's going to want to move at some point, and when the wood is trying to move and you've got something trying to stop it, something's going to break. Either there'll be a split in the top, or the screw will be pulled out of wherever it's screwed into. Something bad will happen. You have to allow movement where nature wants movement to occur. But what you can do is screw the table onto the apron at a fixed point in the middle, so that there'll be no movement there, but movement will occur from the middle outwards. Now this is not a large tabletop, obviously, so we're at a maximum we're talking 2 millimeters movement on each side, maybe, so not a lot, but you do need to allow for some. But because you don't need to allow for movement right in the middle, I'm just going to use a standard, this is made by Zenith. It's expensive to buy things in small quantities. I just didn't have any, so I went down to a hardware store and bought these. They're just angle brackets, like so. One screw will go through into the apron, another screw will go through into the tabletop. And you could, in fact I think I will, just because it seems more secure, you could put 2 of these next to each other. As long as they're fairly close to each other and pretty close to the middle, that won't cause any problem. There'll be virtually no movement in that situation. The movement will occur out here. So let's do that. Okay, so the table is secured, and for such a small table, that's actually probably enough. Oh, no, but I am going to put another bracket on, one here and one here, and those haven't arrived yet. So I'll do that tomorrow. So my brackets have arrived. They're made by Hafel, who make a lot of furniture fittings. They're just called fasteners brackets. I don't think the name is any more angle bracket with horizontal adjustment slot. And it's the slot that's the important part. It's got one hole for a screw and one slot for a screw. And because it's a slot, that allows for movement, and that's the whole point of this. You can get some that are specifically marketed as tabletop fasteners. They do tend to be slightly more expensive, and you get that. It's like if you buy disposable razors at the supermarket. If you just bought a green disposable razor, it would cost a certain amount. But then if they sold them in pink and blue, and each one was sold as razor for him and razor for her, they could charge more for them, because you think you're buying something that's especially tailored to you. That's just the way marketing works. But this is usable for any number of purposes, I suppose. And what's important, and yet you have to look carefully at what side you put them on. The slot runs this way, and that's important because the wood, as we discussed previously, moves this way, so it allows for movement in the correct direction. There are different types of fasteners that allow for movement. Maybe I'll use those on another build and talk about those, but this is the one I've got right now. Okay, yep, piece of cake. Now, even though that's done up fairly tightly, I'll back it off a little bit, but it's still done up quite tightly. That will still move before enough force builds up to break this thick tabletop. Alright, my table is now one piece. I'll put it down on the floor because that'll make the top easier to work on, and let's work on finishing it. This is as good a place as any for applying the finish. I had been going to apply Odie's oil, the hard wax oil, which I really like. It's a nice finish, it looks good, But this is going to be a child's dining table, and Odie's oil does provide some protection, but whatever its manufacturers may say about it, and I know they say lots of nice things about their own product, it's maybe a better finish than polyurethane, but it will not provide as good a protective coat as polyurethane. So I'm just going to apply some Zinsser Bullseye Ultimate Polyurethane. I will apply 3 coats of it. I believe it's water-based. I've assumed that it's water-based. Oh yes, you can tell it's water-based because it looks white. I assumed that it was water-based because on reading the tin it said clean up with soap and water. So it must be water-based. The only brushes that I have handy are these wide foam brushes, so I'll have to pour it out into a container. Right, it's the easiest stuff in the world to apply is water-based polyurethane.
Varnishing the tabletop shine, making wood sing with glee. Glossy dreams gonna be mine. Brush strokes set me free. Underneath the light smooth, reflecting all my hopes out.
This is now the 3rd coat. Earlier I went out and bought some paintbrushes. Alright, that'll do. I'll show it off once it's dry. Yeah, that's what I'll do. Back soon. Well, we are done. We are done, and this table looks pretty fabulous, I think. I am a fan of how it turned out. Lovely. I'm not going to put it into use right away with my grandson. I will give it... Let's see, I finished varnishing it yesterday. I'll give it about 4 days from now. It's already, very dry to the touch, but just give it an opportunity to cure. And in the meantime, I'm going to start making a chair for it. Yeah, a seat of some sort. Well, I already know exactly what sort, but you're about to find out in the next video, because that's where we're going next. So, take care. Until then, I will see you soon.